Evelyn Cross grabbed the champagne flute and pointed it straight at the rusted Ford F-150 in the back corner of the parking lot. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present Detroit's finest innovation. Does it run on prayers or food stamps?" The crowd erupted. Executives howled. Phones recorded everything. 30 feet away, Marcus Thompson stood, frozen mop handle still gripped in his calloused hands. 54 years old. Gray jumpsuit. Invisible for 6 years. But what none of them knew, what Evelyn Cross would spend the next 3 years regretting, was that hidden beneath that rusted hood sat a fusion reactor worth $2 billion. And the man they just humiliated was the only person alive who could make it work. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. The October sun hung low over Detroit, painting the glass towers of Nexus Energy Solutions in shades of gold that made the building look almost holy, almost worthy of the promises its billboards made about saving the planet. Marcus Thompson didn't look at the building anymore. He'd stopped looking 6 years ago, right around the time he realized that nobody inside those glass walls would ever look at him. He pushed his mop bucket across the lobby floor, the wheels squeaking against marble that cost more per square foot than his entire apartment. The sound was familiar now, comforting even. The rhythm of invisibility. "Marcus." He turned. Derek Nash was walking toward him with that particular smile, the one that never reached his eyes. 44 years old, Harvard MBA Senior Vice President of Operations. The kind of man who kept a Tesla in the garage and a Porsche in the driveway because one car couldn't contain his success. "Ms. Cross wants everyone outside for the innovation showcase. That means support staff too." Marcus leaned his mop against the wall. "I've got floors to finish." "She specifically asked for you." Derek's smile widened. Something about making sure everyone feels included. The way he said included made Marcus's jaw tighten. But he nodded and followed Derek through the lobby, past the security desk, where the guards never learned his name, through the glass doors, into sunshine that felt too bright, too exposed. The parking lot had been transformed. 50 executives and engineers formed a loose semicircle around a small stage. Champagne flowed. Phones were out. The quarterly innovation showcase had become Evelyn Cross's favorite ritual, a chance to see what toys her people had bought with their bonuses. Teslas lined the premium spots closest to the building. A BMW i8 gleamed near the entrance. Someone had arrived in a Mercedes EQS that cost more than most people made in 5 years. And then in the far corner, tucked away like something shameful, sat Marcus's truck. A 1987 Ford F-150. Blue paint faded to the color of old denim, rust spreading across the hood like a disease. The passenger door hadn't closed right in 15 years. The bed was covered with a weathered tarp, hiding what looked like an old generator. Marcus had parked there every day for 6 years. Nobody had ever noticed. Nobody had ever cared. Until today. Evelyn Cross stood at the center of the crowd, champagne in one hand, microphone in the other. 45 years old, but looking 35, with blonde hair pulled back tight enough to hurt. Her designer suit probably cost more than Marcus's annual salary. She'd inherited Nexus Energy from her father, Harold Cross, 3 years ago. In that time, she'd tripled the stock price, expanded into 12 countries, and never once learned the name of the man who mopped her floors. Now she was pointing directly at his truck. "Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the future of transportation." The crowd erupted. Camera flashes lit up the afternoon air. Someone shouted about junkyard chic. Another voice called out, "Does it run on hopes and prayers?" Evelyn let the laughter build, riding the wave of her own cleverness. "I was going to ask if it runs on food stamps, but that might be insensitive." More laughter. Louder this time. Someone whistled. Marcus stood 30 feet away, feeling every eye slide toward him, then away, like he was a stain they didn't want to acknowledge directly. His hands were shaking. Not from anger he'd burned through anger years ago. From something deeper, something that felt like the ground opening up beneath his feet. There he is. Evelyn's voice cut through the noise. "Our guest of honor. Come on up. Don't be shy." The crowd parted. Marcus felt Derek's hand on his shoulder pushing him forward with pressure that suggested retreat wasn't an option. He walked. Each step felt like walking through water. The faces around him blurred executives in expensive suits, engineers with PhDs, people who had never cleaned a toilet or scrubbed a floor or wondered if they could afford both groceries and medicine in the same week. Evelyn was grinning when he reached the front. That particular grin of someone who had never been told no, who had never lost anything that couldn't be replaced. "Everyone, this is—" She paused, looked at Derek. "What's his name again?" "Marcus." Derek supplied. "Marcus Thompson." "Marcus?" "That's right." Evelyn turned back to the crowd. "Marcus has been with us for how long?" "6 years," Marcus said quietly. 6 years. And in all that time, Marcus has been driving that beautiful vintage vehicle to work every single day. I thought, why not include everyone in our innovation showcase, even our janitorial staff? She pronounced janitorial the way someone might pronounce infectious disease. A woman in the crowd, one of the junior engineers, shifted uncomfortably. Her name was Patricia Reeves, and she'd smiled at Marcus once in the elevator. Asked him how his day was going. He remembered because it was the first time anyone had asked in 3 years. "That is your truck, isn't it?" Evelyn continued. "The vintage model." More laughter. Someone in the back started a slow clap that caught on for a few beats before dying out. Marcus looked at his truck. The rust on the hood, the faded paint, the tarp covering the bed, hiding the generator that wasn't really a generator at all. He thought about Denise. Thought about the night she died holding his hand in that hospital room, barely able to whisper, "Don't let them bury it, Marcus. Don't let them win. Promise me." Thought about the 20 years since MIT, since NASA, since the patents that got stolen and the lawsuits they couldn't afford, and the career that evaporated like morning dew. Thought about the fusion reactor hidden in the bed of that truck. The reactor he and Denise had spent 18 years building. The reactor that had been running for 15 years without a single drop of fuel. Something shifted inside him then. 6 years of invisibility cracking like old ice. "You want to hear it run?" The laughter stuttered, stopped. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, champagne halfway to her lips. "Excuse me. The truck. You want to hear the engine?" Derek's hand landed on Marcus's shoulder again, heavier this time. "Marcus, maybe you should just—" But Marcus was already walking toward the F-150. The crowd parted, confusion replacing amusement. Whispers started up behind him. What's he doing? Is he serious? This should be good. He reached the truck and put his hand on the door handle. Metal warm from afternoon sun. Familiar. Comforting. The door opened with the squeal of hinges that needed oil. Marcus slid into the driver's seat and the smell hit him immediately. Old leather, motor oil, and something else, something only he could identify. Denise's perfume. Faint now, almost gone, but still there. Still with him. Always with him. He put his hands on the steering wheel and closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to stay invisible, but they won't let me." Then he turned the key. The engine didn't sputter, didn't cough or wheeze or groan, didn't make any of the sounds you'd expect from a 40-year-old truck with rust eating its hood. Instead, it sang. A deep, smooth, powerful harmonic that rolled across the parking lot like distant thunder. The sound was unlike anything that crowd had ever heard. Not from a car, not from a plane, not from any machine ever built. Pure. Perfect. Alive. The laughter stopped. Every single person in that parking lot went silent. Marcus revved the engine once, twice, 3 times. Each time that impossible sound filled the air, vibrating in their chests, making their teeth hum with frequencies that shouldn't exist. Evelyn's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the asphalt. Patricia Reeves pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race in response to something she couldn't understand but recognized instinctively as important. Revolutionary. Impossible. Derek Nash's smile had vanished completely, replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Marcus killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. He stepped out of the truck, closed the door gently, and walked back toward the building without looking at anyone. His gray coveralls brushed against executives in $1,000 suits. His calloused hands hung at his sides like they belonged to someone who had worked his whole life, who had built things with those hands, who had loved and lost and survived in ways these people would never understand. Evelyn's voice chased him across the parking lot, all the mockery stripped away, replaced by something raw and hungry. Wait, what was that? What kind of engine? But Marcus was already gone, disappearing through the glass doors, returning to his mop and his bucket and his invisibility. Behind him, the crowd stood frozen, staring at the rusted F-150 like they had just witnessed a miracle. Because they had. They just didn't know it yet. Evelyn couldn't sleep that night. She lay in her penthouse bedroom 40 floors above Detroit, staring at the ceiling, listening to that sound replay in her mind, over and over, like a song she couldn't forget. That engine. That impossible engine. She'd been around vehicles her whole life. Her father had built Nexus Energy from a small auto parts manufacturer into a renewable energy giant. She'd grown up in garages and factories, surrounded by the smell of gasoline and the roar of combustion engines. She knew what machines sounded like. Every machine had a signature, a fingerprint, the cough of a cold start, the growl of acceleration, the whine of gears engaging. After 45 years, Evelyn could identify most engines by sound alone. That smooth, perfect, almost musical tone was not something any machine should be able to make. 2 a.m, and she reached for her phone. Derek answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Evelyn, it's 2 a.m. I need you in my office tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock sharp. What? Why? I need everything you can find on Marcus Thompson. Employment history, background check, previous addresses, education records. I want to know where he came from, where he worked before, what he did before he started pushing a mop around my building. Silence stretched across the line. She could hear Derek breathing, hear him calculating what this meant for his own position. You want me to investigate the janitor? Did you hear that engine today? Yeah, it was different, I guess. Old truck probably has some custom work. Different. Evelyn sat up in bed, adrenaline burning through her exhaustion. Derek, I've heard engines from Ferrari, from Lamborghini, from military jets that can break the sound barrier. I've sat in on demonstrations of cutting-edge propulsion systems from every major defense contractor in the country. I have never heard anything like that. Not once. Not ever. She could hear Derek processing on the other end of the line, recalculating, adjusting his approach. 6 a.m., my office, don't be late. She hung up and lay back down, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus Thompson's face as he walked back into the building. No triumph, no satisfaction, no revenge, just sadness. Like a man carrying a weight too heavy to bear. Derek was waiting in her office at 5:45, which meant he'd probably been there since 5:30 preparing his report. A thin folder sat on her desk, thicker than it should have been for a janitor. Evelyn picked it up and started reading. Coffee grew cold in her other hand as the morning light strengthened outside her window. Marcus Thompson, 54 years old, born in Detroit to a working-class family. Father was a mechanic. Mother was a nurse. Bachelor's degree in nuclear physics from MIT. Master's from Stanford. PhD from Caltech. Evelyn stopped reading. Her coffee cup made a sharp sound against the desk. Wait. MIT, Stanford, Caltech. Derek leaned forward in his chair. For the first time since she'd known him, she saw something in his expression that might have been genuine surprise. It gets better. After Caltech, he spent 15 years at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, worked on propulsion systems for deep space missions, published 47 papers, won 3 major awards. The guy was a rising star. There was talk he was being considered for division director. Evelyn felt something cold creep up her spine. The kind of cold that came when pieces started fitting together in ways you didn't want them to. Then what the hell is he doing mopping my floors? That's where it gets strange. Derek pointed at the folder. About 20 years ago, he just disappears. Leaves NASA, drops off the grid completely. No publications, no patents, no employment records, nothing. It's like he ceased to exist. People don't just disappear. He did, for 14 years. Then 6 years ago, he shows up here, applies for a janitorial position, with a resume that lists him as a high school dropout with no work experience. A fake resume. Whoever did his background check didn't dig very deep. Or they didn't care. Evelyn stared at the folder. Who investigates janitors right? A NASA engineer. A propulsion specialist. A PhD from Caltech, hiding in her building for 6 years, mopping floors and emptying trash cans. The question wasn't just why. The question was, what else was he hiding? Derek reached into his briefcase and pulled out a printout. An old newspaper article from the Detroit Free Press dated 20 years ago. The paper was yellowed at the edges from 2 decades of digital storage. There's one more thing. I found this from right before Thompson disappeared from NASA. The headline made Evelyn's blood run cold. Physicist's wife dies after long battle with cancer. Lawsuit against energy company dismissed same week. Below it, a photograph of Marcus Thompson looking younger, thinner, his eyes hollow with grief. He stood beside a woman in a hospital bed. She was smiling despite the tubes in her arms, despite the shadows under her eyes that spoke of months of treatment and pain. The woman was beautiful. Dark skin, high cheekbones, intelligence radiating from her expression even through the haze of medication. She was holding Marcus's hand like she would never let go. Her name was Denise Thompson. She had been a nuclear physicist. She had been Marcus's wife for 20 years. She had died at 44 years old, and the company she and Marcus had been suing was Nexus Energy. Evelyn read the article 3 times. The details were sparse but damning. Marcus and Denise Thompson had developed some kind of revolutionary energy system. They'd approached Nexus Energy under her father's leadership for funding and partnership. A dispute had arisen. Patents had been filed. Lawsuits had followed. The Thompsons lost. Denise died the same week their final appeal was dismissed, and then Marcus disappeared from public life entirely. Evelyn set down the printout and looked at Derek. Her hands were trembling slightly, but her voice was steady. The patents they were fighting over. Where are they now? Derek's expression shifted. Something flickered behind his eyes. Caution maybe, or calculation. I'd have to check the archives. Check them, today. I want to see every patent my father acquired around that time. Every legal filing, every internal memo, everything. Evelyn. Derek hesitated. Are you sure you want to dig into this? Your father's been dead for 3 years. Whatever happened between him and this Thompson guy, it was 20 years ago. Ancient history. That engine I heard yesterday isn't ancient history. Evelyn stood up and walked to the window looking out over Detroit. That sound was something new, something impossible. And if Marcus Thompson has been sitting on technology like that for 20 years, I need to know why. And I need to know what my father had to do with it. Derek was quiet for a long moment. I'll pull the files, he finally said. But Evelyn, some doors, once you open them, you can't close again. Get me the files, Derek. He nodded and left the office. Evelyn stood at the window watching the sun rise over a city that had once been the manufacturing heart of America. A city that had fallen, risen, fallen again. A city built on the backs of people who worked with their hands, who built things, who created value that others profited from. A city where a brilliant physicist could become invisible simply by putting on a gray jumpsuit. She thought about Marcus Thompson's face when he stepped out of that truck. The sadness in his eyes, the weight on his shoulders. She thought about her father dead, now buried in a marble mausoleum that cost more than most people's houses. And she thought about the sound of that engine, that impossible, beautiful sound that haunted her dreams and made her wonder for the first time in her life what else she didn't know about the empire she'd inherited. 3 days later, the files arrived. Derek brought them himself, carrying a banker's box that looked too heavy for its size. He set it on Evelyn's desk without meeting her eyes. "These are from your father's private archives, the stuff that wasn't digitized, that wasn't supposed to exist." Evelyn lifted the lid. Inside were documents, legal papers, patent applications, internal memos, written in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Cold, precise, businesslike. She started reading. The first document was a letter from Marcus and Denise Thompson, dated 21 years ago, addressed to Harold Cross, CEO of Nexus Energy. "Dear Mr. Cross, we are writing to propose a partnership that we believe could revolutionize the energy industry. Over the past 12 years, my wife and I have developed a breakthrough in fusion technology, a compact reactor system capable of generating clean, sustainable power with zero emissions and virtually unlimited fuel supply. We have attached preliminary specifications and test results. As you will see, our prototype has demonstrated continuous operation for over 2,000 hours without external fuel input. We believe this technology could eliminate dependence on fossil fuels within a generation. We are seeking a partnership with Nexus Energy to bring this technology to market. We believe your company's expertise in renewable energy combined with our technical innovations could change the world. We look forward to your response. Sincerely, Dr. Marcus Thompson. Dr. Denise Thompson." Evelyn stared at the letter. Her hands were shaking. She pulled out the next document. A memo from her father to his legal team. Thompson fusion patents acquired. Total cost $3.2 million in legal fees. Settlement with Thompsons, $0. Their lawyers withdrew when they couldn't afford to continue. Technology assessment potentially revolutionary, but current prototypes unreliable. Our engineering team has been unable to replicate results. The Thompsons apparently kept critical components undocumented, stored in their heads, not on paper. Recommendation: bury the patents. Prevent competitors from developing similar technology. If we can't use it, no one can. Note: Denise Thompson died April 14th. Marcus Thompson has disappeared. No further legal action expected. Evelyn read the memo 3 times. Then 4. Her father had stolen technology from a dying woman and her grieving husband. Had buried it in corporate archives. Had used legal warfare to crush 2 people who just wanted to change the world. And then he'd gone home to his mansion and slept soundly because that's what powerful people did. They took what they wanted and called it business. There was more in the box. Patent filings. Engineering reports. Assessments from Nexus scientists who couldn't make the Thompson reactor work because they didn't have the full design. And at the bottom, a handwritten note in her father's script. Thompson problem resolved. Technology secured. They'll never recover. Evelyn set down the note. For a long moment, she just sat there staring at the box of evidence, at the documentation of her family's sins. She thought about Marcus Thompson pushing that mop across her lobby floor. Invisible. Forgotten. Working in the building of the company that had destroyed his life. 6 years. 6 years he'd been here. Walking past her every morning, cleaning her office every night, carrying the weight of everything her father had done. And she'd never even learned his name. Derek's voice broke through her thoughts. "What do you want to do?" Evelyn looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes wet with tears she didn't try to hide. "I want surveillance footage. Every camera in the parking lot. I want to see what he does with that truck when no one's watching." Derek hesitated. She could see him weighing the request against whatever remained of his conscience. "Do it." The footage arrived that evening. Evelyn locked her office door and watched alone. The first video showed Marcus arriving at work at 5:30 in the morning, parking the F-150 in the far corner of the lot. Same spot every day. Nothing unusual. The second video showed him leaving at 11:00 p.m., 3 hours after his shift ended. He didn't go straight to his truck. Instead, he walked to the bed, pulled back the tarp, opened a panel on the generator that wasn't really a generator. Evelyn leaned closer to the screen. Marcus was working. Checking gauges, adjusting connections, monitoring readings on a handheld device. His movements were precise. Practiced the movements of an engineer, not a janitor. This wasn't casual maintenance. This was science. She fast-forwarded through weeks of footage. Same pattern every night. Marcus stayed late, worked on the reactor for 2 or 3 hours, then drove home. Nobody noticed. Nobody cared. He was just the janitor. Then she found it. In one clip from 11 days ago, Marcus disconnected what appeared to be the main power coupling. Stepped back from the truck. Started the engine. The reactor ran with no power coupling connected. The reactor ran for 10 minutes before Marcus shut it down, reconnected the coupling, and drove away. Evelyn paused the video. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to set down her coffee cup. A fusion reactor that runs without external connections. That recycles its own energy. That sounds like nothing else on Earth. She thought about her father's memo. Technology secured. They'll never recover. But Marcus had recovered. He'd spent 20 years perfecting what her father had tried to bury. And now he was driving it around in a rusted truck, hiding in plain sight, waiting. Waiting for what Evelyn didn't know. But she was about to find out. The next morning, she called Marcus into her office. He came in still wearing his gray coveralls, hands rough and calloused from years of work. He stood near the door like he was ready to flee at any moment. "Sit down." Marcus didn't move. "Please." Evelyn's voice came out softer than she intended, almost gentle. "Please sit down." Slowly, he lowered himself into the chair across from her desk. His back was straight, his shoulders tense, like a man who had learned to expect the worst and was rarely disappointed. Evelyn studied him for a long moment. The gray in his hair, the lines around his eyes, the hands that had built revolutionary technology and now spent their days scrubbing floors. "I did some research on you." She kept her voice neutral, professional. "MIT, Stanford, Caltech, NASA. You were a propulsion engineer, a nuclear physicist, one of the best in the country from what I can tell." Marcus's expression didn't change. That was a long time ago. Not that long. 20 years isn't ancient history. Evelyn leaned forward. "You could have worked anywhere. SpaceX would have hired you in a heartbeat. Boeing, Lockheed. You could have started your own company. Why are you here, Marcus? Why are you pushing a mop around my building? I needed a job." "You needed to hide." Evelyn's voice sharpened slightly. "You're hiding something. That truck of yours, that engine, I've heard a lot of machines in my life. I've never heard anything like that." For the first time, something flickered in Marcus's eyes. A warning, maybe, or a memory. "It's just an old truck." "Then you won't mind selling it to me." Silence filled the office like water rising in a sealed room. "I'll give you $50,000, cash, today. More than that truck is worth by any measure." Marcus shook his head slowly. "It's not for sale." $100,000. "No." $200,000, Marcus, for a rusted Ford with a weird engine. Nobody says no to that. I'm saying no." Evelyn stood up and walked around her desk, stopping a few feet from where Marcus sat. Close enough to see the pulse in his neck, the tension in his jaw. $500,000. Final offer. $500,000 for a truck that blue books at less than $2,000. Marcus rose slowly to his feet. He was taller than Evelyn remembered, his presence larger somehow in the confined space of the office. "You really don't understand, do you?" His voice was quiet, but carried weight. The weight of 20 years. The weight of loss that never healed. "You see that truck, and you think money. You think opportunity. You think asset to be acquired. But that's not what it is." He took a step closer. Evelyn held her ground, but something in her chest tightened. "That truck is all I have left of my wife. Every time I turn that key, I hear her voice. Every mile I drive, I feel her beside me. You can't buy that, Ms. Cross. Not for $500,000. Not for $500 million. Not for everything your father stole from us." The words landed like blows. Evelyn felt something twist in her chest, an emotion she didn't recognize. Maybe guilt. Maybe shame. She pushed it down. "Everyone has a price, Marcus." "No." He shook his head, his eyes never leaving hers. "Everyone doesn't. Some things are sacred. Some things matter more than money. But you wouldn't understand that, would you? You've never lost anything that couldn't be replaced." He walked to the door, then stopped without turning around. "I know who your father was. I know what he did, what he built, and what he destroyed to build it." Evelyn's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" But Marcus was already gone. The door swinging shut behind him, leaving her alone with the files on her desk, and the ghosts she was only beginning to understand. That night, Evelyn didn't go home. She sat in her office until midnight, reading through the box of documents again and again, looking for something she might have missed. Some justification. Some excuse. Some way to reconcile the father she remembered with the man who had written those cold, calculating memos. She found nothing. At 2 a.m., she called Richard Morrison. Richard was 82 years old now, confined to a wheelchair, living in a mansion in Grosse Pointe that cost more than most people would earn in a lifetime. He'd been Harold Cross's best friend for 40 years. He'd been there at the beginning, had helped build Nexus Energy from nothing. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice thick with age and sleep. "Evelyn, do you know what time it is? Tell me about Marcus Thompson." Silence stretched across the line, long enough that Evelyn thought the call might have disconnected. "Richard, tell me about Marcus Thompson. I think you'd better come to my house." His voice had changed, heavier now, weighted with something that sounded almost like relief. "There are some things your father never wanted you to know, things I promised him I'd take to my grave. I'll be there in an hour. Evelyn." Richard's voice stopped her just before she hung up. "Whatever you're planning to do, be careful. Some doors, once you open them, change everything that comes after." "The door's already open, Richard. I'm just trying to see what's on the other side." She hung up the phone, grabbed her keys, and walked out into the Detroit night. Behind her, the box of documents sat on her desk, illuminated by the glow of the city lights. Evidence of sins she hadn't committed, but had benefited from crimes she hadn't known about, but had built her life upon. The empire she'd inherited was rotten at its foundation, and the man who could prove it was somewhere in this city driving a rusted truck with a revolutionary engine, carrying the memory of a wife who had died believing her life's work was buried forever. What happened next would determine everything. Richard Morrison's mansion sat at the end of a long driveway lined with oak trees older than the automobile industry itself. Evelyn had been here 100 times as a child, running through hallways that seemed to stretch forever, playing hide-and-seek in rooms filled with antique furniture and oil paintings of men who had built empires. Now those hallways felt different, smaller somehow, haunted. Richard was waiting for her in the study, his wheelchair positioned near the fireplace, where flames cast dancing shadows across walls lined with books he'd probably never read. He looked older than she remembered, shrunken, diminished, like a man who had been carrying weight for too long and was finally ready to set it down. "Sit down, Evelyn." She didn't sit. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, heart pounding. Tell me everything." Richard sighed a long, heavy sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. "Your father was my best friend for 40 years. I loved him like a brother. But I never said I was proud of everything he did." "What did he do to Marcus Thompson?" Richard wheeled himself to a cabinet near the bookshelf. His hands trembled as he opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder thick with papers that had yellowed with age. 21 years ago, Marcus and Denise Thompson came to your father with something remarkable, a fusion reactor small enough to fit in the bed of a pickup truck. Clean energy, unlimited power, the kind of technology that could change the world. He held out the folder. Evelyn crossed the room and took it. They were young, brilliant, naive. They thought your father would help them bring it to market. They thought they'd found a partner. Evelyn opened the folder. Inside were photographs, Marcus and Denise, standing beside their prototype, smiling hopeful, unaware of what was coming. There were letters, contracts, legal filings that documented a systematic campaign of destruction. Your father saw an opportunity, Richard continued. A young black couple with no money, no connections, no way to defend themselves. And technology that could be worth billions. He stole their patents. He did worse than that. Richard's voice cracked. He didn't just take their work. He destroyed them. Used lawyers to bury them in litigation they couldn't afford. Had them blacklisted from every research institution in the country. Made sure no one would hire them, fund them, or believe them. Evelyn felt her legs weaken. She sat down heavily in the nearest chair, the folder still clutched in her hands. Denise got sick about a year into the lawsuits. Cancer. They couldn't afford treatment and legal fees at the same time. Marcus tried to settle, offered to walk away to let your father have everything just so he could focus on his wife. What did my father say? Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. He said no. Said settling would be an admission of wrongdoing. Said that Thompsons needed to be completely destroyed so they could never come back. He told me... Richard's voice broke. He told me that Denise dying would solve the problem permanently. That without her, Marcus would fall apart. That the technology would die with them. Evelyn felt sick. Actually physically sick. She pressed her hand to her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. He killed her. He didn't pull the trigger, but he made sure she died without ever seeing her work recognized. He made sure she died believing she had failed. And you knew. All this time you knew and you said nothing. Richard's eyes were wet with tears now. I was a coward, Evelyn. I told myself it was just business. Told myself there was nothing I could do. Told myself that your father was too powerful to challenge. You could have testified. You could have... I could have done a lot of things. Richard's voice rose then fell again. But I didn't, and I've lived with that shame every day for 20 years. Evelyn looked down at the folder in her hands. At the photographs of Marcus and Denise young and hopeful, unaware that they were about to be crushed by forces they couldn't even see. Why did Marcus come back? Why is he working at Nexus? Richard shook his head slowly. I don't know. I didn't even know he was there until you called. But if I had to guess... He paused, choosing his words carefully. He's waiting for something. The Marcus Thompson I remember wasn't the type to give up. He's been working on that reactor for 20 years. If he's hiding in your building mopping your floors, there's a reason. And you might not like it when you find out what it is. Evelyn stood up abruptly. The folder felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. What am I supposed to do with this? That's not for me to say. Your father made his choices. Now you have to make yours. He was a monster. He was a complicated man. Brilliant, ruthless, capable of great kindness and great cruelty. Richard met her eyes. The question is, what kind of person are you going to be? Are you going to bury this like he did? Or are you going to be better than him? Evelyn didn't answer. She walked out of Richard's study, out of his mansion, into the cold Detroit night. The drive back to her penthouse took 45 minutes. She didn't remember any of it. When she got home, she sat in the dark for hours, staring at the folder in her hands, at the documentation of her family's sins. She thought about Marcus Thompson, invisible in her building for 6 years. She thought about Denise Thompson dying in a hospital room while lawyers argued about patents. She thought about her father dead now, buried in marble, leaving behind an empire built on stolen dreams. And she made a decision. The next morning, Evelyn called Derek into her office at 7 a.m. He arrived looking smug, that particular expression he wore when he thought he knew where a conversation was heading. He'd been her father's right-hand man for 15 years before becoming hers. He knew where the bodies were buried. He probably helped bury some of them. "You wanted to see me. Fire him." Derek blinked. "Fire who?" "Marcus Thompson, the janitor. I want him gone by noon." For a moment, Derek's composure slipped. Something flickered behind his eyes, surprise maybe, or satisfaction. What happened? Why the sudden urgency? "I don't need a reason. I'm the CEO. I can fire anyone I want." "Of course you can. But security will escort him out. Make sure he doesn't take anything from the building. And Derek." Evelyn met his eyes, her voice cold. "This stays between us. No paperwork, no HR involvement, no record of why he was terminated. Just make him disappear." Derek studied her for a long moment, that calculating look she'd seen 1,000 times. Then he nodded. "I'll handle it personally." He turned and walked out, and Evelyn was left alone with the folder on her desk and the weight of what she'd just done. She told herself it was necessary, told herself that getting rid of Marcus would make the problem go away, told herself that some doors needed to stay closed, that some truths were better left buried. But somewhere deep inside, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew the truth. She was doing exactly what her father would have done. Taking from the powerless, crushing anyone who threatened her position. She was becoming him. At 11:47 a.m., Marcus Thompson was escorted out of Nexus Energy Solutions by 2 security guards. Evelyn watched from her office window as he crossed the parking lot toward his truck. He didn't look back at the building, didn't make a scene, didn't shout or threaten or demand explanations. He just walked, calm, steady, like a man who had been expecting this moment for a long time. He opened the truck door, slid into the driver's seat, and turned the key. That sound again. That impossible, beautiful sound that had haunted Evelyn's dreams for weeks now. Then he drove away, and she was left alone, with the silence and the questions she couldn't answer. She thought she'd won. She thought getting rid of him would make the problem disappear. She had no idea she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. 6 days later, Evelyn's phone rang at 3 a.m. Patricia Reeves, her head of engineering, sounded strange on the other end of the line. Tight, like she was holding something back. "Turn on the news. Channel 4, right now." Evelyn fumbled for the remote. The screen flickered to life, showing a press conference in progress. Simple podium, modest backdrop, minimal production values. But at the center stood a man she recognized instantly. Marcus Thompson. He looked different. Clean-shaven, wearing a simple dark suit. His eyes were clear and focused, the exhaustion replaced by something else, something that looked like purpose. "I'm pleased to announce that Phoenix Power has received federal funding of $50 million for the development of our clean energy propulsion system." Evelyn's heart stopped. "This technology, which my late wife Denise and I developed together over 20 years ago, has the potential to revolutionize not just the energy industry, but transportation as a whole. The Phoenix reactor is a self-sustaining fusion system that recycles its own energy output. In laboratory conditions, our prototype has run continuously for over 1,000 hours without any external fuel source." Evelyn couldn't breathe. Her coffee sat forgotten on the nightstand, going cold in the darkness. "We believe this technology can eliminate carbon emissions in power generation while simultaneously reducing costs and increasing efficiency. It's what Denise dreamed of before she died. It's what we spent our lives building together." Reporters started shouting questions, voices overlapping in their urgency. One cut through the noise louder than the rest. "Mr. Thompson, is it true that this technology was stolen from you 20 years ago? Is it true that Nexus Energy acquired your patents through fraudulent means?" Marcus paused. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "There will be a time to discuss the history of this technology. For now, I want to focus on the future, on what the Phoenix reactor can do for the world." He looked directly into the camera, and Evelyn felt like he was looking straight at her. "My wife believed this technology could help people. That's what matters. That's what I'm here to honor." The press conference continued, but Evelyn wasn't listening anymore. $50 million in federal funding. Technology that could make her entire company obsolete. And Marcus Thompson, the janitor she'd mocked and humiliated and fired, was now the face of the future. But it was the reporter's question that made her blood run cold. "Is it true that this technology was stolen from you? The world was about to find out everything." Evelyn picked up the phone and called Richard Morrison. He answered on the second ring, his voice alert despite the hour. He'd been expecting this call. "You saw the news. What do I do?" "That depends on who you want to be, Evelyn." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do." Richard's voice was firm. "You can fight him. You can use every lawyer and every resource at your disposal to bury this story. Discredit him. Protect your father's legacy. It's what Harold would have done. It's what he did do 20 years ago. Or you can tell the truth. Acknowledge what was done. Make it right. That would destroy the company. It would destroy everything my father built. Your father built his empire on a lie, Evelyn, on stolen technology and a dead woman's dreams. Is that really what you want to protect?" Evelyn didn't answer. She couldn't. "You're at a crossroads. The choice you make now will determine everything that comes after. Choose carefully." He hung up, leaving Evelyn alone in the dark, with the sound of Marcus Thompson's voice echoing in her mind. For the next 2 weeks, Evelyn tried to pretend nothing had changed. She went to board meetings, signed contracts, made decisions about acquisitions and expansions and quarterly projections. She smiled at investors and charmed partners and did everything a CEO was supposed to do. But everywhere she went, the questions followed. Her board members wanted to know about the Phoenix Power announcement. Her lawyers wanted to know about the patent claims. Her PR team wanted to know how to respond to the increasingly aggressive media inquiries. And in the corners of every room, in the spaces between conversations, she could feel the walls closing in. The story broke on a Tuesday morning. Angela Torres, an investigative journalist with the Detroit Free Press, published a front-page exposé with a headline that would change everything. "Energy giant built on stolen dreams. How Nexus destroyed a black physicist's revolutionary invention." Evelyn read the article on her phone while standing in her corner office, watching the sun rise over a city that had once trusted her. The story was thorough, devastating. Torres had interviewed former employees from Nexus's early days. She'd obtained internal documents through Freedom of Information requests. She'd tracked down witnesses who had been silent for 20 years. And she had Marcus Thompson's first extended public statement since his wife's death. "My wife and I spent 18 years developing the Phoenix reactor. We believed it could help solve the climate crisis. We approached Harold Cross for funding and partnership. Instead, he stole our patents, destroyed our careers, and left us with nothing. Denise died believing her life's work had been buried forever. I'm here to prove she was wrong." The article went on to detail the legal maneuvers Harold Cross had used to acquire the patents, the threats, the intimidation, the systematic destruction of Marcus and Denise Thompson's professional reputations. It talked about how Denise had died 3 months after their final appeal was dismissed, her cancer untreated, because they couldn't afford both medical bills and legal fees. It talked about how Marcus had disappeared for 14 years, grieving broken everyone, assuming he had given up. And then, in the final paragraphs, Torres dropped the bombshell. Sources within Nexus Energy confirmed that the company recently terminated Marcus Thompson's employment. Thompson had been working as a janitor at Nexus headquarters for 6 years, apparently without company leadership knowing his true identity. When CEO Evelyn Cross learned of Thompson's background, she allegedly ordered his immediate termination, hoping to prevent him from speaking publicly about the stolen technology. Evelyn's phone started ringing. Board members, investors, her lawyers. The calls came faster than she could ignore them. By 9 a.m., Nexus stock had dropped 32%. By noon, 3 major institutional investors had requested emergency meetings. By 5 p.m., Evelyn's own board of directors had called for her resignation. She sat in her office as the sun set over Detroit, watching her empire crumble in real time. Every news channel was running the story. Social media was exploding with outrage. Hatch justice. For Marcus was trending worldwide. Commentators were calling it the biggest corporate scandal since Enron. And the worst part, the part that made Evelyn want to scream, was that every word in that article was true. Her father had stolen the technology. She had fired the man he'd stolen it from. She was exactly what the world was calling her, a privileged heir who thought rules didn't apply to her family. Derek knocked on her door around 7 p.m. The board wants an answer by morning. They're prepared to vote you out if you don't resign voluntarily. What would you do if you were me? Derek's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. That same calculation she'd seen 100 times. Honestly, I'd resign. Take a severance package. Disappear for a year or two until this blows over. You're young enough to reinvent yourself. Run away, you mean? Strategic retreat. There's a difference. Evelyn finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted, but something in them had changed. My father ran away from what he did. He buried it and pretended it never happened. She shook her head slowly. And look where that got us. Look where it got me. Evelyn, you can't fix this. The damage is done. Thompson has federal funding, public sympathy, and a working technology. You have a failed replication effort and a PR nightmare. There's no path forward here. Maybe not for the company. Evelyn stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. But maybe there's a path forward for me. Derek stared at her, confusion crossing his face. What are you talking about? I'm talking about doing something my father never did, something I've never done. Which is... Evelyn turned back to face him, and for the first time in weeks, her voice was steady. Telling the truth. That night, Evelyn didn't go home. She drove for an hour, not really knowing where she was going, until she found herself parked outside a converted warehouse in southwest Detroit. The sign above the door read, Phoenix Power, in simple letters, and through the windows, she could see lights burning despite the late hour. Engineers working, machines humming, progress being made. The rusted F-150 was parked near the entrance, looking exactly as it had in the Nexus parking lot. Exactly as it had looked in her father's old photographs from 20 years ago. Evelyn sat in her Mercedes for a long time, gathering courage she wasn't sure she possessed. Then she got out and walked to the front door. It was unlocked. She stepped inside and found herself in a workshop filled with equipment prototypes and the organized chaos of serious innovation. A dozen engineers looked up from their work, surprised to see a stranger at this hour. And at the center of it all stood Marcus Thompson, his hands covered in grease, his eyes fixed on Evelyn with an expression she couldn't read. Everyone out. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. The engineers exchanged glances, hesitated for a moment, then filed past Evelyn without a word. In 30 seconds, the workshop was empty except for the two of them. Marcus wiped his hands on a rag, taking his time, letting the silence build. How did you find this place? Public records. The federal grant documentation lists the address. And you came here because... Evelyn took a breath. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to protect herself, to say whatever would get her out of this room safely. Instead, she told the truth. I came to apologize. Marcus's expression didn't change. I read the files. I know what my father did to you and your wife. I know how he stole your work and destroyed your careers. I know he threatened you with lawsuits you couldn't afford to fight. I know he took everything. She felt tears building behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. Not yet. And I'm sorry. Not just for what he did. For what I did. I mocked you in front of the whole company. I tried to buy your truck like it was just property. I fired you when you wouldn't give me what I wanted. She paused, forcing herself to meet his eyes. I was becoming him. I was becoming exactly what he was. And I didn't even see it until it was too late. Marcus studied her for a long moment. His dark eyes gave nothing away. Is this supposed to make me feel better? No. This is supposed to be the truth. Something my family hasn't been very good at telling. Marcus set down the rag and leaned against a workbench. For a moment, he just looked at her, really looked like he was searching for something. Your father came to me once, about a year after he took the patents. Denise was already sick by then. We were drowning in medical bills couldn't afford. Lawyers couldn't afford to fight. His jaw tightened, and Evelyn saw the 20-year-old wound open fresh. He showed up at our apartment in a $3,000 suit. Said he wanted to make things right. Offered us $200,000. Hush money. Sign a confidentiality agreement, walk away, never speak of the Phoenix reactor again. Evelyn felt sick. What did you say? It wasn't up to me. Denise was dying. We needed that money. We could have used it for treatment, for comfort, for more time together. His voice cracked slightly. You know what she said? She said, some things are worth more than money. Some things are worth more than survival. If we take his offer, we'll be dead inside long before the cancer finishes me off. Marcus paused, and Evelyn saw tears gathering in his eyes. She died 3 months later. Never saw a dime of that money. Never saw her work validated. But she died with her integrity intact. She died believing that someday, somehow, the truth would come out. Evelyn's tears were falling now. She didn't bother to wipe them away. I can't give back what my father took. I can't bring Denise back. I can't undo 20 years of injustice. Then why are you here? Because I can stop being him. I can stop being the person I've been. Marcus was quiet for a long time. The workshop hummed around them, machines idling, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. Finally, he walked to a shelf and pulled down a thick binder. Its pages were yellowed with age, the cover worn from years of handling. You know what I remember most about Denise? She believed in second chances. Not because people deserve them. Most of the time they don't. But because she believed that people can change. That the worst version of ourselves doesn't have to be the final version. He held the binder out to Evelyn. These are the original Phoenix reactor specifications, handwritten by me and Denise. Everything your father couldn't steal because we kept it in our heads. Evelyn stared at the binder like it might explode. Why would you give this to me? I'm not giving it to you. I'm testing you. Marcus's eyes were hard now, all the softness gone. Take this home. Study it. If you can understand what Denise and I built, not just the mechanics, but the philosophy, the heart of it, then maybe you're capable of being someone different than your father. He pressed the binder into her hands. And if you can't, then you'll prove that you're exactly who I think you are. And this conversation will be the last we ever have. Evelyn took the binder. It was heavier than she expected. How long do I have? As long as it takes. Marcus turned back to his workbench. Close the door on your way out. Evelyn walked out into the Detroit night, clutching the binder to her chest. Behind her, the lights of Phoenix Power glowed warm against the darkness. In her hands, she held the key to everything. She just didn't know yet if she was strong enough to turn it. Evelyn didn't go back to her penthouse that night. She couldn't face the empty rooms, the expensive furniture, the view of a city that suddenly felt like it belonged to a stranger. Instead, She drove to a 24-hour diner off I-94, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and opened the binder. The first page hit her like a punch to the chest. In elegant handwriting, a woman's handwriting. Denise's handwriting were the words, "For Marcus, for our future, for everyone who needs light in the darkness." Evelyn stared at that dedication for a long time. This wasn't just engineering. This was love. This was hope. This was everything her father had tried to destroy and failed. She turned the page and started reading. The mathematics were brutal. Evelyn had studied engineering in college, had sat through countless technical presentations, had enough background to understand most of what crossed her desk. But this was different. This was genius on a level she'd never encountered. Every equation built on the one before it. Every diagram contained layers of meaning that took her hours to unpack. Denise and Marcus hadn't just designed a reactor. They'd created a philosophy of energy, a new way of thinking about power and sustainability that made everything Evelyn had ever learned seem primitive by comparison. By 3 a.m. her head was pounding. She'd filled half a legal pad with notes, most of them questions she couldn't answer. The waitress had refilled her coffee 4 times and was starting to give her concerned looks. Evelyn didn't care. She kept reading. Around 5 a.m. she found a section labeled Core Principles in Marcus's handwriting. The Phoenix reactor is not about creating energy from nothing. That's impossible. It's about respect. Respecting the energy that already exists. Capturing what would otherwise be lost. Treating waste as opportunity. Below that, in Denise's elegant script, the universe doesn't have a scarcity problem. It has a wisdom problem. We throw away more than we use. The Phoenix changes that. Evelyn read those words 3 times. Respecting the energy that already exists. She thought about her own life. The energy she'd wasted on appearances, on competition, on proving herself to people who didn't matter. The opportunities she'd thrown away because they didn't fit her image of success. The relationships she'd burned because maintaining them required effort she wasn't willing to give. She'd been living her whole life like a wasteful engine, losing more than she used. The sun was rising by the time she left the diner. She drove to a storage facility in Dearborn, rented the largest unit available, and started making calls. Patricia Reeves answered on the 3rd ring, her voice groggy with sleep. "Evelyn? What time is it?" "I need equipment, machine tools, diagnostic systems, welding gear, everything we use for prototype development." "What the board is meeting in 3 hours. They're going to vote you out. You need to be there." "I'm not going to the meeting." "You have to be there. You have to defend yourself." "No, I don't." Evelyn's voice was steady, calm. "I'm done defending who I was. I'm going to become someone worth defending." Silence on the other end of the line. "Patricia, I need you to trust me. Send me the equipment. I'll pay for it myself, whatever it costs." "Evelyn, you're scaring me." "Good. I'm scaring myself too. That's how I know it's real." She hung up before Patricia could argue. Over the next 12 hours, Evelyn transformed the storage unit into a workshop. She maxed out 3 credit cards buying parts and materials. She downloaded software, watched tutorial videos, read technical manuals until her eyes burned. At 2 p.m., her phone buzzed with a news alert. Nexus Energy Board removes CEO Evelyn Cross in unanimous vote. She read the headline, set down her phone, and got back to work. The first prototype took her 8 days to build. It was ugly, clumsy. The welds were uneven, the connections imprecise. Her hands, soft from years of signing documents and shaking hands at cocktail parties, were blistered and cut. She'd burned herself twice with the soldering iron, hit her thumb with a hammer hard enough to turn the nail black, and spent one entire night crying in frustration when a circuit board she'd spent 12 hours assembling turned out to be wired backward. But she kept going. She slept on an air mattress in the corner of the storage unit. She ate takeout from the Chinese place down the street sometimes, forgetting to eat at all until hunger made her hands shake. She showered at a truck stop 3 blocks away. She talked to no one except the delivery drivers who brought her supplies. On day 8, she connected the power cell and turned on her prototype. It ran for 4 seconds before the energy loop collapsed and the whole system overheated. Evelyn sat on the concrete floor staring at the smoking wreckage of her work. Her body ached. Her hands were raw. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours a night in over a week, but something had changed inside her. She wasn't angry, wasn't frustrated. What she felt was something she hadn't experienced in years: determination. She went back to the binder, read the section on energy loop stabilization 3 more times, found a notation in Denise's handwriting that she'd missed before. The key is patience. The system needs time to find its rhythm. Don't force it, guide it. Guide. Don't force it, guide it. Evelyn thought about how she'd lived her whole life, forcing, demanding, taking, never guiding, never waiting, never trusting anything to develop naturally. She rebuilt the prototype, took her time, paid attention to the rhythm Denise described. When she connected the power cell again, she didn't slam the switch. She eased it gently like coaxing a frightened animal. The reactor ran for 30 seconds, then 45, then a minute and 12 seconds before it failed. Progress. 3 weeks into her exile, Richard Morrison found her. He stood in the doorway of the storage unit, leaning heavily on a cane, staring at the chaos inside. The scattered tools, the failed prototypes in the corner, the sleeping bag on the floor. The woman who used to run a $4 billion company, now wearing stained coveralls and a ponytail held together with a rubber band. My God, what have you done to yourself? Evelyn didn't look up from the circuit board she was soldering. I'm learning. Learning what? How to destroy your life. Richard stepped inside, carefully navigating around the debris on the floor. Evelyn, the board has frozen your assets pending an investigation. Your accounts are locked. You're living in a storage unit like a homeless person. I'm not homeless. I'm working. Richard picked up the binder from Marcus Thompson, flipped through a few pages, and set it down again. He gave you this. He's testing me. If I can build the reactor, he'll know I'm serious about changing. And if you can't... Evelyn finally looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot, exhausted, but there was something in them that Richard had never seen before, something that looked almost like peace. Then I'll keep trying until I can. Richard sat down heavily on a crate that groaned under his weight. The board is talking about criminal charges. They're saying you orchestrated a cover-up of your father's theft, that you knew about the stolen patents for years. That's securities fraud, intellectual property theft, conspiracy. You're looking at potential prison time. Let them charge me. You should care, Evelyn. I spent my whole life caring about the wrong things. Evelyn set down the soldering iron and gave Richard her full attention. Stock prices, board meetings, what people thought of me, what my father thought of me, and where did it get me? I was the CEO of a company built on stolen dreams, and I didn't even know it. I was so busy protecting my image that I never bothered to look at what was underneath. She held up the circuit board, examining it in the light. This is real, this work, this challenge. For the first time in my life, I'm trying to build something instead of take something. And even if I fail, even if I go to prison, even if I lose everything, at least I'll know I tried to be different than him. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Your father would have called you a fool. I know. He would have said you're throwing away everything he built. He built it on lies. It was never worth keeping. Richard reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Before I came here, I liquidated some of my own holdings. Cash. Untraceable. It's not much, about 80,000, but it should keep you going for a while. Evelyn stared at the envelope, then at Richard's face. Why would you do that? Because I failed your father once. I watched him do terrible things and said nothing. I won't make the same mistake with you. He pressed the envelope into her hands. Be better than him, Evelyn. That's all I ask. Richard stood up slowly, his joints protesting the movement. For what it's worth, I think Denise Thompson would have liked you. The person you're becoming, I mean, not the person you were. Then he walked out into the afternoon light, leaving Evelyn alone with her work and her binder, and the ghost of a woman she'd never met. The breakthrough came on day 42. Evelyn had rebuilt the prototype 14 times. Each version got a little better, ran a little longer. She'd learned to read Denise's handwriting like a second language, to anticipate Marcus's logic, to understand the philosophy behind every design choice. And finally, something clicked. It wasn't a dramatic moment. No lightning bolt of inspiration. No sudden revelation. Just a quiet understanding that had been building for weeks. Pieces falling into place one by one until the whole picture became clear. The Phoenix reactor wasn't just about energy recapture. It was about harmony. Every component had to work with every other component, not against it. The system couldn't be forced or dominated. It had to be balanced, guided, respected, just like Denise had written. Evelyn made one final adjustment, a small change to the energy flow regulator, something she'd overlooked a dozen times before. She connected the power cell, held her breath, and turned the key. The reactor started. Smooth, quiet, perfect. Evelyn watched the diagnostic readouts, waiting for the collapse, waiting for the overheat warning, waiting for failure. 5 minutes passed. 10, 20. The energy loop held. The system recycled its own output, feeding back into itself, sustaining motion without external fuel. It wasn't perpetual. Nothing was perpetual, but it was close. Closer than anything she'd ever seen. Evelyn sat down on the concrete floor and cried. Not from exhaustion, though she was exhausted. Not from relief, though she was relieved. She cried because for the first time in her life, she had built something real, something true, something that mattered. And she cried because she understood now what Marcus had lost. The woman who had written those notes, who had dreamed these dreams, who had poured her heart into this impossible vision, she was gone. And all the money and power in the world couldn't bring her back. Evelyn cried for Denise Thompson, a woman she'd never known and could never thank. And somewhere in those tears, she found the person she wanted to become. She called Marcus the next morning. It works. Silence on the other end of the line. The reactor, I built it. It's been running for 14 hours. More silence. Then Marcus's voice, guarded, but something else too. Something that might have been surprise. You actually did it. I want to show you. I want you to see that I understand what you and Denise created. Not just the mechanics, the meaning, the philosophy. Why does that matter to you? Evelyn gripped the phone tighter. Because I need you to see that I'm not my father. I need anyone to believe that people can change, that I can change. Marcus was quiet for so long that Evelyn thought he might hang up. Then his voice came back, softer, but still careful. Where are you? She gave him the address. I'll be there in 2 hours. Don't touch anything. Marcus arrived exactly when he said he would. He walked into the storage unit without speaking, his eyes moving across the chaos. The failed prototypes in the corner. The tools scattered across workbenches. The binder lying open to a page covered in Evelyn's handwritten notes. Then he saw the reactor. It was still running. That smooth, quiet hum filling the space like music. The diagnostic screens showed stable readings. The energy loop was holding perfectly. Marcus walked closer. He examined every connection, every circuit, every component. He checked the readings, ran his own diagnostics, monitored the system for any sign of degradation. 15 minutes passed in silence. Finally, he turned to face Evelyn. How long did this take you? 42 days. And you built it alone. No help from anyone. No help, just the binder and a lot of trial and error. Marcus looked back at the reactor. His expression was unreadable, but his hands were trembling slightly. This configuration, the adjustment you made to the flow regulator, it's not in the binder. Evelyn nodded carefully. I know. I figured it out on my own. It's based on something Denise wrote in the margins about harmony, about every component working with every other component. I realized the original design had a small imbalance in the feedback loop. The change corrects it." Marcus stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, something that looked almost like wonder. "You improved it." "I didn't mean to. I was just trying to make it work." "No." Marcus shook his head slowly. "Denise and I spent 18 years on this reactor. We knew that imbalance was there, but we couldn't figure out how to fix it. And you found the answer in 42 days. Evelyn didn't know what to say. Marcus walked to the binder and picked it up. He flipped through the pages, slowly, looking at Evelyn's notes, her calculations, her questions and answers, written in the margins alongside Denise's original text. She would have liked this. Denise. She would have liked seeing her work continue, seeing someone else understand what we were trying to do. I wish I could have met her. So do I. Marcus set down the binder and turned to face Evelyn fully. You know what she told me once, right before she died? Evelyn shook her head. She said that the Phoenix reactor wasn't just about energy. It was about faith. Faith that the universe gives us what we need if we're wise enough to accept it. Faith that waste can become wealth. That loss can become gain. He paused, and Evelyn saw tears gathering in his eyes. She said that someday the right person would find our work and carry it forward. Someone who understood that technology isn't about power, it's about service, about helping people. Evelyn felt tears burning in her own eyes again. I'm not sure I'm that person. No, you're not. Not yet. Marcus's voice was gentle now, almost kind. But you might be becoming her, and that's more than I ever expected. He reached out his hand. Evelyn stared at it for a moment, not understanding. Then Marcus spoke again, and the words landed with the weight of everything that had come before. I need a partner. Phoenix Power is growing faster than I can handle alone. The federal grant is just the beginning. We've got interest from power companies, from governments, from investors all over the world. I need someone who understands the technology, who believes in the mission, and who has the skills to navigate the business side of things. You want me to work with you. I want to give you a chance to prove who you are. Not your father's daughter, not the CEO who fired me, but the woman who spent 42 days in a storage unit destroying her hands and her reputation and her pride just to understand what two people built out of love. Evelyn looked at his hand. Rough, calloused. The hand of a man who had lost everything and refused to give up. She thought about her own hands, blistered now, scarred, transformed. She took his hand and shook it. I'll work harder than anyone you've ever met. I'll do whatever it takes to earn this. I know you will. Marcus released her hand and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he stopped and turned back. Shut down the reactor and pack your things. You start tomorrow. Marcus, he paused. Thank you for giving me this chance, for believing I could change. For the first time since she'd met him, something that might have been a smile crossed Marcus's face. Don't thank me yet. The hard part is just beginning. Then he walked out into the morning light, leaving Evelyn alone with the reactor and the binder and the future she was finally ready to build. Evelyn showed up at Phoenix Power at 6 a.m. the next morning, 3 hours before anyone else arrived. The door was locked, so she sat on the concrete steps outside and waited. Detroit fog hung thick over the street, turning everything soft and gray. She pulled her jacket tighter and watched her breath form clouds in the cold air. Sleep hadn't come the night before. Her mind kept racing through everything that had happened. The storage unit. The reactor. Marcus's hand reaching out to her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Denise's handwriting in the binder. Those careful notes filled with hope and love and scientific genius that had outlived the woman who wrote them. A car pulled into the lot at 6:47. the F-150 still carrying its impossible secret under that battered hood. Marcus got out and stopped when he saw her on the steps. "You're early." "I couldn't sleep." "That'll pass." He walked past her and unlocked the door. "Come on, I'll show you where you'll be working." The workshop looked different in the early light. Quieter. More intimate. Evelyn followed Marcus through the main floor, past the workbenches and diagnostic equipment to a small office in the back corner. "This was supposed to be a supply closet, but we needed the space. You'll share it with our CFO if we ever hire one." Evelyn looked around. A metal desk, 2 folding chairs, an ancient computer, a single window looking out at the parking lot. The smallest office she'd ever seen. Smaller than her penthouse bathroom. "It's perfect." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You used to have a corner office with a view of the entire city." "I used to be a lot of things." Evelyn set her bag on the desk and met his gaze without flinching. "What do you need me to do?" For the next 3 months, Evelyn learned what it meant to build something from nothing. She answered phones when the receptionist was overwhelmed. She filed paperwork that the government required in triplicate. She negotiated with suppliers who didn't return calls because they'd never heard of Phoenix Power and didn't care about clean energy or revolutionary reactors. She learned to fix the coffee maker when it broke, to unclog the toilet when the plumber wanted $300 just to show up, to stay late reconciling spreadsheets because they couldn't afford an accountant yet. The other engineers didn't trust her at first. They'd all heard the stories. The CEO who mocked their boss in a parking lot. The heiress who tried to steal their technology. They watched her with suspicious eyes, waiting for the mask to slip, waiting for the real Evelyn Cross to emerge and reveal that this whole redemption act was just another scheme. Evelyn didn't blame them. She just kept working. Kept showing up at 6 a.m. Kept staying until midnight. Kept doing whatever needed to be done without complaint or expectation of recognition. One night about 6 weeks in, she was alone in the workshop running diagnostics on a new prototype iteration when Marcus appeared beside her. The building was dark except for her workstation. Everyone else had long gone home to families and lives that existed outside these walls. "It's midnight. Go home. I want to finish these tests. The General Electric meeting is in 3 days. If we don't have solid data, the tests can wait." Marcus's voice was gentle but firm, carrying an authority that didn't come from volume. "You've been here since 6 a.m. You've been here since 6 a.m. every day for 6 weeks. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours?" Evelyn tried to remember and couldn't. Marcus pulled up a chair and sat down beside her, close enough that she could smell motor oil and something else, something that reminded her of honesty. "You're going to burn out, and then you'll be useless to everyone including yourself." "I can't stop." Evelyn's voice cracked despite her best efforts to keep it steady. "Every time I slow down, I think about everything I did. Everything my father did. I think about how many years you lost because of us. How Denise died without ever seeing her work recognized. I can't just go home and watch TV and pretend everything's okay." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he started talking, his voice soft in the darkness of the workshop. "Let me tell you something about Denise. When she was dying, when we both knew she only had a few weeks left, I wanted to spend every minute at her bedside. I wanted to hold her hand and tell her I loved her, and make up for all the time we'd lost fighting the lawsuits, fighting your father, fighting to survive." He paused, and Evelyn saw something raw in his expression. "You know what she said? She said, 'Marcus, if you sit here watching me die, you'll die too. Not physically, but inside. You'll carry this grief like a weight until it crushes you.' She made me promise to take breaks, to eat meals, to sleep, to live." Evelyn felt tears on her cheeks, but didn't wipe them away. She said that guilt is just another form of selfishness. When we punish ourselves, we're making everything about us, our pain, our redemption, our story. But real change isn't about punishment, it's about service. It's about taking the energy we'd waste on guilt and using it to help someone else. "How do you do that?" Evelyn's whisper barely carried across the space between them. How do you stop feeling guilty for something that can never be fixed? You don't stop feeling it. You just learn to carry it differently. Marcus's eyes met hers. Like the reactor, you don't eliminate the waste. You transform it. You turn it into something useful. Evelyn looked at the prototype on the bench. The smooth curves of the housing. The precise arrangement of components. Denise's design improved by Evelyn's hands carried forward by Marcus's faith. I don't know if I can do this. Be the person you need me to be. The person Denise would have wanted. Neither do I. Marcus stood up, stretching muscles that had been bent over reactors too long. But I'm willing to find out. Are you? Evelyn nodded. Go home. Get some sleep. Come back tomorrow ready to transform your waste into something useful. He walked toward the door, then stopped halfway. Evelyn? She looked up. You asked me once how I stop feeling guilty. The truth is, I don't. I feel it every day. Every time I look at that truck. Every time I turn that key and hear the engine Denise helped me build. His voice softened. But I also feel something else. I feel her with me. I feel her believing in me. And that's stronger than the guilt. That's what keeps me going. He met her eyes one last time. Find something that's stronger than your guilt, something worth living for instead of dying from. That's the only way through. Then he walked out into the night, leaving Evelyn alone with the reactor and the quiet hum of a dream that was finally coming true. Something shifted between them after that conversation. Not romance, not yet, but something deeper. The foundation of trust that would make everything else possible. The understanding that they were both carrying weight too heavy to bear alone, and that maybe together they could share the load. The General Electric meeting changed everything. Evelyn had spent weeks preparing. Financial projections, technical specifications, market analyses, risk assessments. She'd rehearsed her presentation until she could deliver it in her sleep, anticipated every possible question and objection. But when the GE executives walked into the Phoenix Power Workshop, led by a silver-haired man named Thomas Hartley, who looked like he'd forgotten more about energy systems than most people would ever learn, they didn't want to see PowerPoint slides. We've read your materials. Impressive numbers. Hartley's voice carried the weight of 30 years in an industry that didn't suffer fools. But numbers can be manipulated. Show us something real. Marcus looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at the F-150 parked in its usual spot in the corner of the workshop. Follow me. She led the GE team outside to where the truck sat in morning light that made the rust look almost intentional, almost beautiful. Hartley wrinkled his nose. This is your demonstration. This is the original. The first Phoenix reactor ever built. It's been running for 20 years in this truck. It's survived cross-country trips. Michigan winters, Detroit summers. It's never needed a major repair. It's never needed fuel. Never needed fuel. Hartley's skepticism came through sharp and clear. That's quite a claim. Watch. Evelyn opened the hood. The GE engineers crowded around their doubt, giving way to curiosity as they examined the components. She pointed out the energy recapture systems, the regenerative loops, the harmonized flow regulators. Marcus connected the monitoring equipment while Evelyn climbed into the driver's seat. The leather was cracked and worn. The dashboard faded. It looked like a truck that should have been scrapped 2 decades ago. Evelyn turned the key. That sound filled the parking lot. Pure. Perfect. Alive. The GE engineers stared at their tablets, watching data flow across their screens. Energy in, energy recycled, energy out. A loop that sustained itself, that grew stronger over time instead of weaker. One of the engineers whispered something that sounded like prayer. That's not possible. And yet there it is. The demonstration lasted an hour. Evelyn answered every question, explained every component, walked through every technical detail without overselling or exaggerating. She just told the truth about what Marcus and Denise had built and what it could do. When it was over, Thomas Hartley stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the F-150 like he was seeing the future taking shape in rust and determination. I've been in this industry for 32 years. I've seen a lot of people promise miracles. Most of them were lying. A few of them were delusional. He shook his head slowly. But this is real. It's real, and we're ready to scale it. Hartley turned to face Evelyn fully. I know who you are, Ms. Cross. I know what your father did. I know what you did. There are people at GE who think we shouldn't be anywhere near you or this company. Evelyn's stomach tightened, but she held his gaze. What do you think? I think people can change. I think technology doesn't care about politics or history or family legacies. And I think this reactor could transform the entire energy industry. He extended his hand. GE is prepared to offer a partnership agreement. $2 billion over 5 years in exchange for exclusive licensing rights to the Phoenix technology for power generation applications. $2 billion. Evelyn felt dizzy. This was more money than she'd ever handled at Nexus. More than her father's entire company had been worth when he died. But it wasn't the money that made her hands shake. It was the validation. The proof that Denise's dream could survive, could flourish, could change the world exactly the way she'd hoped. We'll need to discuss terms, of course. Of course. Hartley's grip was firm, his eyes harder than steel. But Ms. Cross, don't make us regret this. There won't be a second chance. That night, after the GE team had left and the paperwork had been signed and the champagne had been opened and put away, mostly untouched, Evelyn found Marcus alone in the workshop. He was sitting in the driver's seat of the F-150, hands on the steering wheel, eyes closed. She knocked gently on the window. He opened his eyes slowly, like a man waking from a dream he didn't want to leave. You okay? Just talking to Denise. Evelyn didn't know what to say to that, so she just stood there waiting. Marcus opened the passenger door. Get in. She climbed into the truck, settling into the worn leather seat. The smell hit her immediately. Old leather, motor oil, and something else, something faint and floral that must have been Denise's perfume still lingering after all these years. They sat in silence for a while. The reactor hummed quietly beneath them, that perfect sound filling the space like music. $2 billion. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper. Denise would have laughed. She never cared about money. She just wanted to help people. She still is. Through this. Through you. Marcus turned to look at her. In the dim light of the workshop, his eyes were wet. I've been angry for 20 years. Angry at your father. Angry at the world. Angry at myself for not being able to protect her. He paused. I didn't think I'd ever stop being angry. And now I'm tired. I'm tired of carrying all that weight. I'm tired of fighting ghosts. He reached out and took Evelyn's hand. His palm was rough, calloused from decades of work. You asked me once why I gave you a chance, why I believed you could change. Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. It wasn't because I'm forgiving. I'm not. I still wake up every night thinking about what your father did. I still see Denise's face in my dreams, asking me why I couldn't save her. His grip tightened slightly. I gave you a chance because Denise would have wanted me to. Because she believed in second chances more than she believed in revenge. And because when I looked in your eyes that night in this workshop, I saw something I recognized. What? Grief. Real grief. The kind you can't fake. Marcus turned to face the windshield, looking out at nothing. You were grieving for the person you used to be. The person your father made you. You were mourning her, and you were trying to become someone new. I know what that feels like. I've been doing it for 20 years. Evelyn felt tears running down her cheeks. She didn't try to hide them. I'm not the same person anymore. I don't think I could be that person again, even if I wanted to. I know. Marcus's voice was gentle now. That's why I'm still here. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. What's tomorrow? Marcus smiled a real smile, the first one she'd ever seen from him. Tomorrow, you tell the world the truth. 3 weeks after the GE deal was announced, Evelyn called a press conference. She stood backstage in a modest conference center in downtown Detroit, wearing a simple black suit with no jewelry, nothing that would remind anyone of the woman she used to be. Her hands were shaking. Marcus stood beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. You don't have to do this. We could settle everything privately. Find another way. No. Evelyn shook her head. I spent my whole life hiding from hard truths, running from my father's shadow, pretending I could inherit his success without inheriting his sins. That ends today. Are you scared? Terrified. Evelyn laughed and it came out shaky but real. But Denise was right. Guilt is just another form of selfishness. I've been so focused on my own redemption that I forgot about everyone else who was hurt. The investors who trusted Nexus, the employees who lost their jobs, you, the man who lost 20 years of his life because of my family. She turned to face Marcus fully. If I can't face the truth in public, then everything I've done in the past few months is just performance, just another mask. Marcus reached out and squeezed her hand. For what it's worth, I don't think it's performance. I think you've actually changed. How can you tell? Because the Evelyn Cross I met a year ago would never be shaking before a press conference. She was too sure of herself, too armored. His eyes softened. The woman standing here right now is vulnerable. Real. He released her hand, but the warmth lingered. Denise always said that vulnerability is the price of transformation. If it doesn't scare you, it isn't real change. The stage manager appeared at Evelyn's elbow. Ms. Cross, they're ready for you. Evelyn took a deep breath that felt like it might be her last as the old version of herself. Wish me luck. I don't believe in luck. I believe in choices. Go make the right one. The conference room was packed. Journalists, investors, industry analysts, lawyers. Everyone who mattered in the energy world had come to hear what Evelyn Cross had to say. Cameras lined the back wall. Microphones bristled from the podium. The buzz of conversation fell silent as Evelyn walked to the stage. She set her notes on the podium, looked out at the crowd, and pushed the notes aside. I had a speech prepared. 3 pages of carefully worded statements designed to minimize legal liability and protect my reputation. She paused. But I've decided to do something different. I've decided to tell you the truth. The room went completely still. 20 years ago, my father, Harold Cross, founder of Nexus Energy, stole revolutionary technology from 2 brilliant engineers named Marcus and Denise Thompson. He used lawyers and threats and his superior resources to take their patents, destroy their careers, and bury their work. The foundation of Nexus Energy, the technology that made us an industry leader, was built on that theft. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Keyboards started clicking as journalists typed frantically. I didn't know about this until recently, but ignorance isn't innocence. I benefited from what my father did. I built my career on his stolen success. And when I finally learned the truth, my first instinct was to do exactly what he would have done: steal from Marcus Thompson again. Take the Phoenix reactor technology and claim it for Nexus. She paused, letting the confession settle. I was wrong. I was so wrong. And I'm here today to acknowledge that, to apologize for it, and to commit publicly to a different path. Evelyn talked for 45 minutes. She laid out the entire history without softening or excusing. Her father's theft, the buried patents, Marcus and Denise's destroyed careers, the cancer that killed Denise while lawyers argued about money. She explained how she'd learned the truth, how she'd tried to replicate the technology, how she'd been forced out of her own company when the scandal broke. Then she talked about the storage unit, the 42 days, the blisters on her hands. The moment the reactor finally ran, and she understood what Denise had been trying to teach her. I can't undo what my father did. I can't bring back the years Marcus lost. I can't give Denise the recognition she deserved while she was alive. Her voice cracked, but she pushed through. But I can do something he never did. I can tell the truth. I can use whatever influence I have left to make sure the Phoenix technology reaches the people who need it. I can spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the second chance I've been given. She looked directly into the cameras. To everyone who was hurt by my father's actions, I'm sorry. To Marcus Thompson, who showed me grace when I deserved condemnation, thank you. And to Denise Thompson, who I never had the honor to meet, I promise you that your dream will not be buried again. Your work will change the world, and everyone will know your name. Evelyn stepped back from the podium. The room erupted with questions, hostile and sympathetic voices overlapping in their urgency. She answered them one by one for an hour, hiding nothing, deflecting nothing. By the end, she was exhausted, emptied out, but also somehow lighter, like she'd been carrying stones in her pockets and finally let them fall. She walked off stage to find Marcus waiting. His eyes were wet. You did it. You actually did it. Is it enough? I don't know, but it's a start. They walked out of the conference center together into the bright Michigan sun. 2 weeks after the press conference, everything changed again. Evelyn arrived at Phoenix Power early on a Tuesday morning to find Marcus pacing in the workshop, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Someone's leaking our technical specifications. One of our engineers found fragments of our proprietary data on a Chinese energy company's internal servers. Data that could only have come from inside this building. Evelyn felt ice spread through her chest. She'd seen this pattern before, recognized the tactics from her years at Nexus. Someone's trying to sabotage us. Not just someone. Someone who knows exactly how your father operated. Legal threats, supplier disruptions, false information to regulators. This isn't random corporate espionage. This is systematic destruction. Marcus handed her a folder filled with printouts, emails, financial records, shipping manifests. Our suppliers are canceling contracts. Our permit applications are being delayed. 3 of our best engineers got job offers last week from Nexus subsidiaries, offers too good to refuse. Evelyn flipped through the documents, her mind racing. Who would have this kind of access, this kind of knowledge? That's what I was hoping you could tell me. Evelyn stopped on a financial record, a wire transfer from an offshore account to a shell company in the Caymans. The amount was $2.3 million. The date was 3 weeks ago, the same week she'd announced the GE partnership. Derek Nash. Marcus looked at her sharply. Your father's VP. He was there from the beginning. He helped orchestrate the original theft 20 years ago. He knows where all the bodies are buried because he helped bury them. Evelyn's hands were shaking. After my father died, Derek stayed on to protect the secret, to make sure no one ever discovered what Nexus was really built on. When I exposed everything, he must have decided to destroy Phoenix Power before we could succeed. Can you prove it? Give me 24 hours. Evelyn spent the next day calling in every favor she had left. Former colleagues who still owed her, investigators who worked off the books, tech specialists who could trace digital footprints across continents. By midnight, she had her answer. Derek Nash had been receiving payments from 3 different foreign energy companies for the past 6 months. He'd been meeting with Nexus board members in secret. He'd been systematically feeding them information about Phoenix Power's technology strategy and vulnerabilities. And he'd been doing it all from inside Nexus headquarters, using his position as senior VP to access systems and people who should have been off limits. Evelyn brought the evidence to Marcus at 6 a.m. We need to set a trap. What kind of trap? A fake technical meeting. I'll mention a breakthrough that doesn't exist, something too valuable to ignore. If Derek is our mole, he won't be able to resist. Marcus studied her face for a long moment. You're sure about this? I'm sure that Derek Nash helped my father destroy your life. I'm sure he's trying to finish the job." Her voice hardened. "And I'm sure that he needs to be stopped." They set the trap that afternoon. Evelyn scheduled a video call with the Phoenix Power Engineering team, a call she knew Derek would be monitoring through his contacts at Nexus. She discussed a fictional breakthrough in reactor efficiency, a modification that could double the power output while cutting costs in half. She made it sound revolutionary, irresistible. That night, she and Marcus waited in the darkened workshop with the security cameras rolling. At 11:47 p.m., a side door opened. Derek Nash stepped inside. He moved quickly professionally, clearly familiar with the layout from reconnaissance he'd done before. He went straight to the main computer terminal and plugged in a USB drive. Evelyn watched him download files, photograph documents, plant something on the server malware probably designed to corrupt their systems from the inside. Then she stepped out of the shadows. "Hello, Derek." He spun around, his face going pale in the dim light. "Evelyn, how did you? 20 years ago, you helped my father steal the Phoenix reactor technology from Marcus and Denise Thompson. You helped him bury their patents. You helped him destroy their careers." She walked closer, her voice steady, despite the fury burning in her chest. "And when Denise died, when Marcus lost everything, you went home and slept soundly because you told yourself it was just business." Derek's expression shifted, the shock fading, replaced by something harder, something ugly. "Your father was a great man, a visionary. He understood that progress requires sacrifice, that the strong survive and the weak get left behind. My father was a thief and a liar, and so are you." Derek laughed. The sound was hollow. "Wrong. You think you're any different? You think a few months of playing poor in a storage unit makes you some kind of saint? You're a cross. You've got his blood in your veins, his instincts. You're just too weak to use them. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just strong enough to choose something different." Marcus stepped out of the shadows behind Derek. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Derek whirled around, but there was nowhere to go. Security guards had appeared at both exits. The police were already on their way. "This is ridiculous. You can't prove anything. My lawyers will—" "Your lawyers will tell you to take whatever deal the prosecutors offer." Evelyn pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. "We have you on camera. We have your financial records. We have testimony from 4 of your contacts at the Chinese energy company you were feeding our data to. It's over, Derek. It's all over." Derek's face contorted with rage. "Your father would be ashamed of you." "Good." Evelyn's voice was ice. "I'm ashamed of him too. That's the difference between us." The police arrived 15 minutes later. They watched as Derek was handcuffed and led out of the building. His face was red with fury, his protests growing louder and more desperate as reality set in. When the door closed behind him, Marcus turned to Evelyn. "It's really over. The Derek part is over. The rest is just beginning." She looked around the workshop, at the reactors they'd built, at the future they were creating. "Denise would be proud of you, of what you've done here. She'd be proud of both of us." Marcus's voice was soft. "She believed in second chances, remember? She believed that people could change." "Do you believe it? Now, after everything?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I believe that you changed. I watched it happen. I saw you tear yourself apart and put yourself back together as someone new." He met her eyes. "So yes, I believe it. Because I've seen it." Evelyn felt something crack inside her, something that had been holding on too tight for too long. "I don't know who I'm supposed to be now. I spent my whole life being Harold Cross's daughter, the CEO, the heiress. I don't know how to be anything else." "You don't have to know." Marcus reached out and took her hand. "You just have to keep choosing, every day, every moment. Keep choosing to be someone different than who you were. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "That's what Denise taught me. That's what got me through 20 years of grief and anger and pain. You don't become a new person all at once. You become a new person one choice at a time." Evelyn looked at their joined hands. His dark skin against her pale fingers. Two people from different worlds connected by tragedy and transformation and something else she was only beginning to understand. "Marcus." "Yeah. I think I'm falling in love with you." The words came out before she could stop them, before she could think about whether they were appropriate or welcome or wise. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand tighter. "I know. I've known for a while." Is that okay?" "I don't know." His voice was honest, raw. "I loved Denise for 25 years. I've been mourning her for 20. I don't know if I'm capable of feeling that way about someone else." Evelyn's heart sank. "But," Marcus continued, "I also know that I feel something when I'm with you. Something I haven't felt in a long time. Something that makes me want to keep trying, keep building, keep living." He turned to face her fully. "I can't promise you anything. I can't promise that I'll be able to love you the way you deserve. But I can promise that I'll be honest, that I'll keep showing up, that I'll keep choosing you one day at a time for as long as you'll let me." Evelyn felt tears running down her cheeks. "That's enough. That's more than enough." Marcus reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Go home. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." "What's tomorrow?" For the second time she saw Marcus smile. "Tomorrow, we start building the future." The months that followed Derek Nash's arrest moved faster than Evelyn had ever experienced. Phoenix Power grew from a small workshop in southwest Detroit into a company that couldn't be ignored. The GE partnership opened doors that had been closed for decades. Government contracts followed. International interest poured in. But the thing that changed Evelyn's life most wasn't the money or the recognition, or the endless stream of meetings with executives who suddenly wanted to be her friend. It was the family she was building. Marcus had a daughter. Jasmine was 16 years old, smart and serious with her mother's curiosity and her father's stubbornness. She'd been raised by a single father who worked too hard and grieved too long, and she carried that weight in ways that broke Evelyn's heart. Evelyn had a daughter too. Claire was 14, sensitive and watchful, desperate for attention that her mother had been too busy to give. She'd grown up in penthouses and private schools, surrounded by wealth, but starving for connection. The two girls met for the first time at Phoenix Power on a Friday afternoon in early spring. Evelyn was in her office, still the converted supply closet, still the smallest office she'd ever had when she heard voices in the workshop. She walked out to find Jasmine showing Claire how the reactor cooling system worked. "See this gauge? It measures the thermal variance in the primary loop. If it goes above this line, the whole system shuts down automatically." Claire was nodding, genuinely interested. "Did your mom help design this?" Jasmine's expression softened. "Yeah, she did. My dad says she was the genius. He was just the guy who could build what she imagined." "That's really cool. My mom can't build anything. She used to just sign checks and yell at people." Evelyn felt her face flush. She started to retreat back to her office, but Jasmine's voice stopped her. "She's different now, though, right?" Claire turned to look at her mother standing awkwardly in the doorway. "Yeah, she is." Claire's voice was quiet but certain. "She's really different." That night, after the girls had gone home and the workshop had emptied out, Evelyn found Marcus on the roof of the building. He was sitting on an old lawn chair, looking up at stars that could barely be seen through Detroit's light pollution. "Mind if I join you?" He gestured to an empty chair beside him. Evelyn sat down, pulling her jacket tighter against the spring chill. "I saw Jasmine and Claire together today. They were looking at the reactor, talking about Denise." Marcus nodded slowly. "Jasmine doesn't talk about her mother much. Not to me, anyway. I think it hurts too much." Claire said I used to just sign checks and yell at people. Did you? Yeah, I did. Evelyn laughed, but it came out bitter. I was so focused on being my father's daughter that I forgot to be Claire's mother. I missed dance recitals, forgot birthdays, left her with nannies who didn't know her middle name. She stared up at the sky. I can't get those years back. I can't undo the damage. No, you can't. Marcus's voice was gentle but honest. But you can be there now. That's what matters to kids. Not the past, the present, the showing up. Is that what Denise would say? That's exactly what Denise would say. They sat in silence for a while, the distant sounds of the city filling the space between them. I want our daughters to know each other, Evelyn said finally. I want them to grow up together. I want them to be family. Marcus turned to look at her. What exactly are you saying, Evelyn? I'm saying I love you. I'm saying I want to build a life with you. I'm saying I'm tired of being alone, and I think you're tired too. She met his eyes. I'm saying I want to be your partner. In everything. Not just business. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Denise has been gone for 20 years. For 20 years I've been married to a ghost. I go to bed thinking about her. I wake up thinking about her. Every decision I make, I ask myself what she would have done. Evelyn felt her heart sink. I understand. I shouldn't have. Let me finish. Marcus held up his hand. For 20 years I've been married to a ghost. And for the first time I think maybe I'm ready to let her rest. He reached out and took Evelyn's hand. I'm never going to stop loving Denise. She's part of me. She always will be. But I'm starting to understand that loving her doesn't mean I can't love anyone else. His voice cracked. I'm starting to understand that she would want me to be happy. That she would want me to live. Marcus. I love you. Evelyn, I don't know when it happened. I didn't expect it. I wasn't looking for it. But it happened, and I'm done pretending it didn't. Evelyn felt tears running down her cheeks. What do we do now? Now. Marcus smiled. Now we take it one day at a time. Now we show up for each other. Now we build something new together. He squeezed her hand. And we tell our daughters that they're about to become sisters. The announcement didn't go the way either of them expected. They sat Jasmine and Claire down in the Phoenix Power break room on a Saturday morning, both adults nervous in a way they hadn't been since their first press conferences. Girls, we have something to tell you, Marcus began. Jasmine and Claire exchanged a look, the kind of look that teenagers had been exchanging since the beginning of time. You're together, Jasmine said. It wasn't a question. We know, Claire added. We've known for like 2 months. Evelyn blinked. You have... Mom, you look at Marcus like he's the last piece of pizza and you haven't eaten in a week. Claire rolled her eyes. It's kind of obvious. And Dad smiles now, Jasmine said. Like actually smiles. He hasn't done that since before Mom died. Marcus and Evelyn looked at each other, completely thrown off their prepared speech. So, you're okay with this? Marcus asked. Jasmine stood up and walked over to her father. She put her hand on his shoulder. Dad, I've watched you carry grief around like a backpack full of rocks for 20 years. I've watched you pretend to be okay when you weren't. I've watched you give up on everything except the reactor and me. Her eyes were wet. Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that once when she was sick. She made me promise that if you ever found someone who made you feel alive again, I'd be okay with it. Jasmine looked at Evelyn. She'd want it to be someone brave, someone who could understand what you've been through, someone who could love you the way you deserve. She paused. I think Mom would have liked you, Evelyn. Not who you were, but who you're becoming. Claire stood up and walked over to her own mother. I've been so angry at you for so long. Angry that you were never there. Angry that you cared more about the company than about me. Angry that I had to find out what kind of person my grandfather was from the newspaper. Evelyn felt shame wash over her hot and heavy. But then I watched you change. I watched you give up everything, the money, the penthouse, the power, because you wanted to be better. I watched you work in a storage unit until your hands bled. I watched you apologize to the whole world for something you didn't even do." Claire's voice softened. "That's not nothing, Mom. That's everything. That's the kind of person I want to be someday. The kind of person who can admit they were wrong and actually change." She looked at Marcus. "And if he makes you happy, if being with him makes you more like the person you're becoming and less like the person you were." Claire smiled. "Then I'm happy too." Evelyn pulled her daughter into a hug. Across the room, Marcus did the same with Jasmine. When they finally separated, Jasmine wiped her eyes and looked at Claire. "So I guess this makes us sisters." "I guess it does." "Cool." Jasmine grinned. "I always wanted a sister. Someone to blame when things go missing." Claire laughed. "I always wanted a sister too. Someone to help me gang up on the parents." The four of them stood there in the break room of a workshop in southwest Detroit, a family forged from tragedy and transformation, and the stubborn refusal to let the past define the future. Marcus reached out and took Evelyn's hand. "I think this is going to work," he said quietly. "I know it is." The wedding was small, close friends and family only. Richard Morrison walked Evelyn down the aisle, tears streaming down his ancient face. Patricia Reeves was there, having left Nexus to join Phoenix Power full-time. A handful of engineers who had believed in the mission from the beginning filled the modest venue. Jasmine and Claire served as joint maids of honor, wearing matching dresses they'd picked out together during 3 hours of shopping that had bonded them more than any conversation could have. Marcus's vows were simple. "Denise taught me that love isn't about holding on to the past. It's about having the courage to build something new. Evelyn, you've shown me that people can change, that broken things can be repaired, that waste can become wealth. I promise to spend every day of my life helping you transform into the person you want to become." Evelyn's vows came through tears. "Marcus, you gave me a second chance when I didn't deserve one. You taught me that real value comes not from what you inherit, but from what you build. You showed me that integrity matters more than success, that truth matters more than comfort. I promise to spend every day of my life honoring Denise's legacy and creating our future." The kiss that followed felt like the beginning of something new, something that had been impossible a year ago. Something that only became possible because two people chose to be different than who they'd been. 3 years after the wedding, on a clear October morning, the first commercial power plant using Phoenix reactor technology went online in Detroit. Marcus and Evelyn stood on the observation platform with Jasmine and Claire, all four holding hands. The massive facility had been built on the site of an old auto plant that had been abandoned for 30 years, a symbol of Detroit's past, becoming a foundation for its future. 100,000 homes would receive clean, unlimited power starting today. Zero emissions, virtually zero cost. The impossible made real. The governor was there, senators, the Secretary of Energy, cameras from every network in the country. But Marcus wasn't looking at any of them. He was looking at the dedication plaque mounted near the entrance. The Denise Thompson Clean Energy Center. Evelyn had insisted on the name, had fought for it when the politicians wanted something more generic, more politically useful, had refused to compromise. This is her achievement, she'd told the board. Her legacy. The world needs to know who made this possible. Now Marcus stood in front of that plaque, reading his wife's name in bronze letters that would outlast them all. "She's here," he whispered. "She's finally here." Evelyn squeezed his hand. "She was always here. We just couldn't see her." The ceremony was brief. Speeches from politicians who had once ignored clean energy entirely. Promises from executives who had spent decades protecting fossil fuel interests. The kind of hypocrisy that came with every major change in human history. But when Marcus stepped to the podium, everything went quiet. 23 years ago, my wife Denise and I started working on an impossible dream. We wanted to create energy from nothing. To capture what would otherwise be lost. To treat waste as opportunity. His voice was steady, strong. We were told it couldn't be done. We were told we were crazy. We were told to give up, go home, find something practical to do with our lives. He looked out at the crowd, at the cameras, at the politicians, at the ordinary people who had gathered to witness history. Denise never gave up, even when we lost everything, even when she was dying. She believed that someday someone would carry our work forward. She believed that the universe gives us what we need if we're wise enough to accept it. Marcus paused, his eyes finding Evelyn in the crowd. She was right. The universe gave me exactly what I needed. Not when I wanted it, not how I expected it, but exactly when I was ready to receive it. He stepped back from the podium. This plant is named for my wife, but it was built by all of us, everyone who believed that the future could be different from the past. Everyone who chose to transform instead of destroy. Everyone who understood that the most valuable things in life aren't always visible. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look past the surface and see the truth underneath. The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus walked off the stage and straight to Evelyn. He pulled her into an embrace that lasted longer than was probably appropriate for a public event. "Thank you," he whispered in her ear. "For what? For seeing me. For believing I was worth seeing. For giving me a reason to keep going when I'd forgotten how." Evelyn held him tighter. "You gave me the same thing. We saved each other, Marcus. That's what partners do." 6 months after the Detroit plant opened, the National Museum of American Innovation created a permanent exhibit honoring the Phoenix reactor. They wanted to display the original prototype, the rusted F-150 that had carried the secret through 20 years of obscurity. Marcus agreed on one condition. Evelyn had to be there for the unveiling. The ceremony was held on a crisp November afternoon. The museum had recreated a version of the Phoenix Power Workshop, complete with workbenches and diagnostic equipment. At the center sat the F-150 rust-preserved paint, untouched exactly as it had looked that day in the Nexus parking lot. A bronze plaque stood beside it. Evelyn read it aloud during her speech to a crowd of hundreds. This vehicle carried a revolution. For 20 years, it transported a dream that powerful forces tried to destroy. The Phoenix reactor, developed by Marcus and Denise Thompson, represents one of the most significant technological achievements in human history. But more than that, it represents the power of persistence, the strength of love, and the possibility of redemption. She walked to the truck and put her hand on the hood, feeling the metal that had been warmed by so many years of Michigan sun and Detroit rain. "I want to tell you a story about a woman I never met, but who changed my life forever." Her voice carried across the silent museum. Her name was Denise Thompson. She believed that technology exists to serve humanity, not to dominate it, not to exploit it, but to lift it up. She believed that the universe doesn't have a scarcity problem, it has a wisdom problem. She believed that waste can become wealth, that loss can become gain. Evelyn's voice broke slightly, but she pushed through. Denise died believing her life's work had been buried. She died thinking that the powerful had won, that innovation could be crushed by greed, that her dream would never reach the people who needed it. She turned back to the crowd. She was wrong. Her work survived. Her dream survived. And today, millions of people around the world are living better lives because of what she built. Evelyn took a deep breath. "I'm not the hero of this story. I'm not even a supporting character. I'm the villain who learned to be something else. I'm the proof that even the worst version of ourselves doesn't have to be the final version." She looked at Marcus, at Jasmine, at Claire. Her family. The family that tragedy and transformation and stubborn hope had built. Denise believed in second chances. She believed in transformation. She believed in the possibility of redemption. And because she believed, I'm standing here today, a different person than I was. A better person. A person who finally understands what it means to build something instead of take something. The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. Journalists shouted questions. But Evelyn was already walking toward Marcus, toward the family waiting for her at the edge of the stage. After the ceremony, when the crowds had dispersed and the museum had grown quiet, Marcus and Evelyn stood alone beside the F-150. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object, a key. Old and worn, its metal smooth from years of use. This is the original key, the one Denise used to start the reactor for the very first time. I've carried it with me every day for 23 years. He held it out to Evelyn. I want you to have it. Marcus, I can't. Yes, you can. His eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. Denise would have wanted this. She believed in passing things forward, not holding them back. This key started a revolution. Now it belongs to the woman who helped finish it. Evelyn took the key with trembling hands. It was warm from Marcus's pocket, worn smooth by decades of hope and grief and persistence. What am I supposed to do with it? Remember. Marcus's voice was soft. Every time you doubt yourself, every time you wonder if you've really changed, hold this key and remember what it started. Remember that the most valuable things in life aren't always visible. Sometimes they're hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look past the rust and see the gold underneath. Evelyn closed her fingers around the key. Outside the museum windows, she could see Jasmine and Claire waiting for them, laughing about something only sisters would find funny. She could see the future they were building together, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. I used to think power meant taking things from other people, she said quietly. I used to think success meant having more than everyone else. I used to think my father was a great man because he built an empire. She shook her head. I was wrong about everything. Power isn't about taking. It's about giving. Success isn't about having more. It's about being more. And my father wasn't great at all. He was just rich. There's a difference. Marcus put his arm around her. What do you think greatness is now? Evelyn looked at the truck, at the key in her hand, at the man beside her and the daughters waiting outside, and the world that was slowly, finally beginning to change. Greatness is building something that matters, something that lasts, something that helps people you'll never meet. She leaned into Marcus's embrace. Greatness is choosing to be better than you were yesterday, every single day, until choosing right becomes as natural as breathing. She looked up at him. Denise was great. You're great. And maybe someday, if I keep trying, if I keep choosing, I'll be great too. Marcus kissed the top of her head. You already are. You just can't see it yet. They walked out of the museum together into the November sun, into the life they'd built from the wreckage of the past. Jasmine ran up to them first. Dad, you'll never guess what Claire and I decided. What's that? We're going to MIT together, both of us. We're going to study engineering and carry on Grandma Denise's work. Claire nodded eagerly. We want to make reactors for places that don't have electricity, villages in Africa, remote islands, anywhere people need power but can't afford it. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. That's exactly what she would have wanted. Exactly what she dreamed about. The four of them walked to the parking lot together. The F-150 was inside the museum, now preserved for history. But parked in its usual spot was a new truck, a modest Ford, practical and unpretentious, carrying a next-generation Phoenix reactor under its hood. Some things changed. Some things stayed the same. Marcus opened the driver's door, then stopped. You know what Denise told me once, right before she died? Everyone fell silent. She said, Marcus, some revolutions start with a bang, others start with a whisper, but the ones that matter most start with a single choice. A choice to believe that tomorrow can be different from today. A choice to build instead of destroy. A choice to love instead of hate. He looked at Evelyn, at Jasmine, at Claire, at the family that had risen from the ashes of tragedy. She was right. This revolution didn't start with money or power or technology. It started with a choice. My choice to keep going when I wanted to give up. Evelyn's choice to become someone different than her father. Our daughter's choice to carry the dream forward. He turned the key and that perfect sound filled the air. Every revolution is just a series of choices. And we get to make new ones every single day. The truck pulled out of the parking lot and onto the street. Behind them, the museum stood as a testament to what had been. Ahead of them, the future stretched out like an open road, and in between 4 people drove toward tomorrow, carrying a dream that had survived theft and tragedy and 20 years of darkness. A dream that proved once and for all that the most powerful force in the universe isn't money or technology or even love. It's the simple, stubborn, world-changing choice to become better than you were before. Some revolutions start with a bang. Others start with a whisper. But the ones that change everything start with a rusted truck in a parking lot, an engine that shouldn't exist, and the unshakable belief that even the most broken things can be made to run again. The janitor got his justice. The heiress found her redemption. And the woman who dreamed it all into existence finally got to rest, knowing that her light would never go out. Because that's what happens when you build something real. It lasts forever.